We're looking at the hacking of one of the world's largest banks by assets, ICBC. Joining us now is Bloomberg's Sonali Basak. And Sonali, this was not just any hack. This is a hack that actually had major implications for the Treasury markets. How concerning is this? How big is the fallout?
Obviously very concerning. You saw the fallout in real time that regarded an auction that the market was already sensitive to. You saw buyers coming in more willfully at the front end of the curve. But when you start to draw out duration, you have a bigger problem here, just generally. So a hack that would impact such a critical part of the plumbing of not just the Treasury market, but new issue of Treasury here, you have a big problem, particularly for also a player in the market that is intimately involved in repurchase agreements. The repo market is a critical player when you think about the leverage provided to the system, and ICBC in the Treasury market over the last 5 or 6 years has become much larger.
Sonali, can you just talk about what's been going on over the last 24 hours? I'm reading stories of courier riders going around banks with thumb drives and plugging them into the USB ports of these banks to try and figure out how to settle some of this stuff. Is that the fix that we ultimately had to come up with?
It's the Band-Aid, the immediate Band-Aid. And, you know, the way I think about these electronic systems here, we've had a very fast electronification of the financial system over the last decade or two. And you now have a Treasury market where there's already, a ton of dispute on how trade should be cleared, whether it should be bilateral or centrally cleared in a larger way. And the SEC is in the process of really forcing the issue of central clearing. Now, let me give you an alternative view here. The idea here is that if you also have central clearing and that party, say the DTCC or somebody else, were to be victim to a cyber attack like this, then what would happen? And so I talked to Jay Clayton, for example, former SEC chair, just yesterday about this, and he's like, you know, I understand the value here of central clearing. However, there still is an issue here of whether counterparties are reduced so drastically to a small few.
Well, so Sonali, obviously a lot of these fixes might take a while to actually be put into place, right? We are talking about a process that might take some time. In the interim, what can be done to protect against this kind of thing?
Listen, you have a lot of banks and the most important parties, right? This is one major counterparty in the Treasury market here, but you do have a very disparate network as it stands today. The bigger issue is what comes ahead. Remember, the group that really had targeted ICBC in this instance was suspected to be Lockbit, which is a network of ransomware attackers here that have already targeted a lot of big firms, including a British fintech firm that was critical to derivatives infrastructure. Now, there's kind of, it's not good that they're being attacked, but at least we know it's kind of the same network of actors, I guess. But if you think about it, the broader problem and the wake-up call that really exists in this moment is, I think back to a conversation I had a long time ago with Scott Minerd when I asked him the biggest concern across the entire financial system that he would have is what would happen if the Fedwire were to get hacked. Really, banks and the Fed and a lot of major actors have really doubled down on cybersecurity, and we have seen some significant cybersecurity scares in the financial industry just this year. So it certainly is a time that people are doubling down once again.